Thanks, Mr. Quack, for inviting me. In fact, I've known Mr. Quack for many, many years because when I first joined the Navy in 1990, long time ago, he was one of the few instructors because he was working in Midshipman School, and that's where Midshipman School actually trained the young naval officers to be ready for the missions in the SAF. So since then, maybe part of his inspiring example, I managed to stay on in the Navy for 27 years. In fact, he likes wet diving, but I like dry diving, so I joined the submarines instead of the surface ships. So it's been an exhilarating journey in the Navy. So I've been exposed to the sea for many, many years. And thereafter, I retired from the Navy and then been with FBA for the last 8 years. And what amazes me, and unfortunately in the Navy we don't really emphasize too much, is actually the history and the heritage of our maritime sort of nation. And since coming MPA, I've got a deeper appreciation that despite the smallness of our physical size, actually it's quite amazing the role that we play in maritime Singapore. We are one of the busiest ports, but we focus a lot more in transshipment. What is transshipment? Some of you may not know, but essentially it's almost like a logistics, I would say, process by which all the ships, the producers from big producing countries, for example, like China, cannot send all their goods directly to one country because there's just too many containers to be consumed by that particular country. So what it does is that actually if it wants to distribute to the consuming countries, it will use transshipment ports like Singapore. Essentially offload the containers, and then in Singapore we try to do it efficiently, to load it to smaller ships and then distribute it to the rest of the region. So actually, we do have an important role to play in terms of the global supply chain. So if for any reason PSA is in a way affected, actually you will lead on to delays and even disruptions to countries trying to receive their goods. Many of you would know that about 90% of all goods are transported by sea. And the sea transportation actually remains, I would say, the most cost-effective means to sort of bring goods from one place to another. All of you must have shoes, I imagine. And you can imagine that once you pack a single container with shoes, the amount of cost to transport from one place to another actually drops to around $2 US per shoe, because you can pack about 2,000 to 3,000 shoes in one single container. If you do it by air, as some of you may know, if you order something from Amazon or whatever, you're probably taking 20, 30 US dollars to just transport your shoe, right? So actually, shipping brings about benefits to you because it lowers the cost of logistics, and I'm glad that Singapore has a part to play. That's why protecting the sea lanes, making sure that it's free, is essential, not just to Singapore, but to the world. But today we are focusing our attention on the Twakow. So as I've done a little bit of research, it's actually a Hokkien translation from English name. If you go back to the actual Chinese word, is Twakow, right? And these were in the old days, now actually it's all freshwater. But in old days, before Marina Barrage was closed up, actually it extends all the way to Singapore River. And in fact, Marina South Pier is the replacement pier for what was Clifford Pier in the old days. Right? So this year we're celebrating MPA formation. We used to be part of PSA, but 30 years ago we sort of split between a regulator as well as a hop operator. So we are celebrating MPA 30. I would like to think that this is one of the events as part of the larger celebration. But we also do have roving exhibitions around Singapore. This morning I was part of the second tranche of roving exhibitions. The first one was done at the Lot 1 in Twakow. Today we launched the second one at the IMM. So if you're doing shopping later, you happen to go to IMM, come to level 3, and then essentially there's a few exhibits. as well as different educational institutes to try to explain to people what maritime is about, and hopefully we try to get more Singaporeans to be part of it. I think we all need to be proud of our heritage. And unfortunately, as government, we can't do it alone. We're very glad that the Singapore Maritime Heritage Interest Group, as well as other interest groups, I've met many, including those that somehow may appear far off from maritime, like the Khao Liang and the wine and the tea. But I heard that actually the very first Maltai was brought in by a warehouse company off the Singapore River back in 1954. So actually there is some linkages to maritime. But I'm glad that this is a ground-up sort of initiative to bring everyone together, to learn about our common history, and to be really proud, because the fact that the port is doing well today is not because of MBA or just the last year's work plan, but it's many, many, many decades of hard work by our ancestors, or our forebears. And we are very grateful that indeed we have people that have the vision, the resilience to really make things work in Singapore, despite all the limitations of our resources and talent and manpower. So I'm really glad this is a celebration of the heritage, because today in the Singapore Maritime Gallery you can look outside and you can see the newer versions of what the Twakow was about. And they continue to actually be a very, very important last mile carriage of people as well as goods. Because the ships are too big to get close, so you need that interface of vessels to bring the crew, which is, a lot of them are below, because a lot of crew take advantage of Singapore as an aviation hub to do crew changes. So the crew will be sent to the ships and then get off-boarded, and then they use Changi Airport to return back home. Right? So they do continue to have a great sort of contribution as part of the larger maritime ecosystem. So I just want to thank, I don't know if the owner of this Twakow is here. Is he here? But in any case, really want to thank the owner. Want to thank the various interest groups to making this a reality. And then I'm looking forward to really learning from our speaker, as well as perhaps interacting with all of you. And in fact, all of you will have very interesting stories. I mean, I managed to talk to some of the painters below, so take the time also to look at their artwork, as well as many of you that are collectors of different parts of history. And every piece of artifact tells an interesting story. So I wish all of you a great afternoon and a wonderful learning journey. Thank you so much.